7 senior Israeli military officers eliminated in a single strike. And the missile that carried it out? Completely unstoppable. Not Arrow, not THAAD, not Patriot. 10 interceptors were fired, and every single one missed. Welcome back to David Unfiltered, and what you're about to hear will permanently alter the way you think about modern warfare. Let's establish the scene. Somewhere inside Israel stood a heavily reinforced IDF command center. Built to endure, hardened, shielded by some of the most advanced air defense technology on the planet. And on a day that military historians will be referencing for decades, Iran sent a single weapon straight through all of it. Footage captured inside Israel documented the moment an Iranian hypersonic glide vehicle made direct contact with that fortified command center, killing 7 senior officers along with a significant number of additional personnel. 7 commanders, 1 strike, 1 missile that no system on Earth managed to intercept. Before we go any further, if you're new here, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because at David Unfiltered, we get to stories like this before the mainstream catches up, and we break them down in a way that actually makes sense. Now let's get into exactly what happened, and more importantly, why it changes everything. The weapon behind this strike is called the Fattah II. It is an Iranian hypersonic missile program developed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Introduced as an evolution of the original Fattah and equipped with a hypersonic glide vehicle engineered for extreme velocity and in-flight maneuverability. The name in Farsi translates to conqueror. And after what it just did to that IDF command center, that name carries a weight it didn't have before. To truly grasp why this missile is in a category of its own, you first have to understand what it is not. Most missiles, the kind that have been deployed in conflicts for generations, follow a predictable flight path. They climb, they trace an arc across the sky, and they descend. Radar systems map that arc, computers calculate the projected point of impact, and interceptors are launched to intercept it at that point. That is the entire underlying logic that multi-billion-dollar air defense systems are engineered around. The Fattah II doesn't operate that way. Rather than tracing a predictable arc like a conventional ballistic missile, it deploys a hypersonic glide vehicle, a maneuverable warhead that weaves through the upper atmosphere at extraordinary speeds. Imagine throwing a stone, only to watch it abruptly change direction mid-flight. That is the challenge now facing air defense radars and targeting computers. A weapon that moves, pivots, and shifts trajectory continuously, all while traveling at speeds that most interceptors fundamentally cannot match. The Fattah II employs a hypersonic glide vehicle rather than a conventional ballistic re-entry vehicle, enabling it to maneuver in both pitch and yaw, sustaining far greater re-entry velocities while approaching targets from angles that cannot be predicted in advance. Such weapons are capable of maintaining atmospheric skip glide or shallow glide flight at hypersonic speeds. Read that again. It approaches from directions that cannot be anticipated, which means even when radar detects it, calculating a valid intercept solution becomes nearly impossible, because the missile is actively adjusting its course throughout the entire engagement window. And just how fast are we actually talking? Iranian officials have stated the Fattah II can reach between Mach 13 and Mach 15, which would translate to roughly 15,000 to 18,000 kilometers per hour under optimal conditions. At that velocity, a missile fired from western Iran could reach targets across a large portion of the Middle East in under 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That is not a generous window in which to detect, verify, authorize, and intercept. And the Fattah II spends every second of those 10 minutes executing movements that make a clean intercept a near impossible proposition. The core engineering obstacles in transitioning from maneuverable re-entry vehicles to hypersonic glide vehicles include surviving surface temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius, preventing catastrophic cracking of composite structural materials, and maintaining reliable guidance and control under conditions of extreme material erosion. In plain terms, constructing a functional hypersonic glide vehicle is a staggering engineering challenge. The thermal environment alone is sufficient to destroy most known materials. Keeping a guidance system operational inside those conditions is a problem that only a small number of nations on Earth have ever solved. And yet Iran appears to have solved it. Now here is the part that will truly command your attention. Following that strike, after 10 interceptors had failed, after 7 senior Israeli officers lay dead, it was not an Iranian general who stood up and declared this missile effectively unstoppable. It was an Israeli defense executive. Uvel Bassi, vice president of leading Israeli missile defense developer Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, publicly acknowledged that the Fattah II had compelled both his firm and the Israel Defense Forces to fundamentally reassess their entire approach to missile defense. He stated that hypersonic missiles had opened a new chapter in air defense and cautioned that conventional defensive strategies were not adequate against what Iran had just demonstrated. Let that settle for a moment. Rafael Advanced Defense Systems is the Israeli company responsible for building many of the very interceptors that were launched at this missile. Their own vice president went on the record to state that their systems are not equipped to handle what Iran just put on display. And he didn't say it behind closed doors. He said it publicly. And then he offered one of the most striking analogies you will ever hear from someone inside the defense industry. Drawing a parallel to basketball, Bassi said that sending a single interceptor missile against a hypersonic missile is like assigning one defender to guard LeBron James. You can chase him all day, but you are not going to prevent him from scoring. That is Israel's own defense sector telling the world that under current conditions, the missile they just faced is essentially unguardable. You can throw resources at it, but it will find its way through. And in this context, scoring means obliterating a hardened military command center and eliminating 7 senior commanders in a single blow. So what does this mean at a strategic level? This is where the story transitions from shocking to genuinely unsettling. The foundational assumption of Israeli military doctrine for decades has been that hardened, fortified command infrastructure is survivable. You bury your command centers, reinforce them, layer them with air defense systems, and your leadership structure remains intact, even through a major confrontation. The Fattah II directly dismantles that assumption. The deployment of the Fattah II against high-value Israeli command infrastructure demonstrates not only the remarkable precision the weapon achieves, which is particularly extraordinary at hypersonic velocities, but also its capacity to penetrate existing air defense networks. Precision at Mach 15. Consider what that actually means. This is not a weapon that simply hurls itself forward at extreme speed and hopes to land somewhere in the vicinity of a target. It located a specific reinforced structure, navigated through layered defensive systems, and struck with enough accuracy to kill 7 senior officers sheltering inside. Now let's look at the timeline of this weapon, because the history here is remarkable. The Fattah II had no confirmed combat use prior to March 1, 2026. The missiles were launched in direct response to a coordinated large-scale military campaign initiated against Iran by the United States and Israel. This was Iran's answer to being attacked. They reached into their arsenal and produced a weapon that had never been fired in actual combat. And the very first time it was deployed operationally, it killed 7 Israeli generals in one strike. On March 1st and 2nd, 2026, Iranian military sources and regional media reported that Fattah II missiles were used to engage high-value military targets, including an IDF command center, as well as U.S. military installations in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar. The IDF command center was not the only target struck. Multiple high-value installations across the broader region were hit by this weapon in what amounted to its operational debut. This was not a demonstration. This was a declaration. And now we have to address the question the defense world is genuinely grappling with. Because here is the uncomfortable reality. Developing and fielding a new defensive system capable of reliably addressing hypersonic threats will take years and tens of billions of dollars, leaving Iran's Fattah II arsenal as a serious and ongoing threat to both Israel and the United States for the foreseeable future. You cannot engineer your way out of this problem overnight. The physics and the manufacturing challenges cannot be rushed. And in the meantime, every reinforced command center, every military installation, every airbase across the region now exists under a new category of threat, for which no reliable solution currently exists. Israel has yet to demonstrate the capability to implement a zone-based interception architecture, which, even if fully funded, would require several years and likely cost tens of billions of dollars to bring online. The probability is high that Iran's Fattah II arsenal will continue to penetrate Israeli defenses with little meaningful resistance for the near term. This reality has placed mounting pressure on Israeli and U.S. forces to prioritize gaining air dominance over Iranian territory in order to destroy ballistic missile launch systems on the ground before they can be activated. That final point is critical. If you cannot neutralize the missile in flight, the only viable alternative is to destroy the launcher before it fires. And that means offensive operations conducted inside Iran. That means an entirely different category of escalation. Let us also step back and look at the broader context, because this strike does not stand alone. It is unfolding within an ongoing conflict that has already produced Iranian strikes against U.S. bases throughout the Gulf, disruption of regional airspace, escalating tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, and now this. A hypersonic missile killing 7 IDF generals inside a fortified command center that was supposed to be protected. Each of these events in isolation would constitute significant breaking news. Together, they describe a conflict that has escalated well beyond what most Western audiences have fully absorbed. Defense industry officials have acknowledged that reconfiguring air defense architecture to contend with hypersonic threats will demand entirely new strategic frameworks. Some analysts have proposed zone-based interception models, in which successive layers of interceptors attempt to engage an incoming weapon as it crosses through different defensive perimeters. Such architectures could meaningfully improve response rates, but would require staggering financial commitment and years of development time. Years. Not months. Years. And the conflict is happening right now, today. There is also the geopolitical dimension that cannot be ignored. Russia has its Oreshnik. China has its DFZF. North Korea has been running hypersonic glide vehicle tests. And now, Iran has delivered combat-proven use of the Fattah II. The flight characteristics and velocity profile of the weapon bear strong resemblance to Russia's Oreshnik deployed in Ukraine, which lends further credibility to Iran's claims of a genuine hypersonic capability. The parallels are not accidental. The world's most advanced hypersonic programs have been developing in parallel and exchanging knowledge. What Iran just demonstrated is a product of that broader technological ecosystem. What makes the Fattah II particularly consequential in the global context is what it communicates to every nation watching this conflict unfold. If a country operating under severe international sanctions, facing continuous military pressure, and working largely outside the mainstream of global defense cooperation, can develop and successfully use a hypersonic glide vehicle capable of penetrating Israeli and American air defense systems, what does that tell us about the future of air defense everywhere? It tells us the rules of the game have fundamentally shifted. It suggests that the multi-billion-dollar investments governments have made in interceptor-based defense systems may be considerably less dependable than those governments have been telling their populations. The implications for the United States are direct and immediate. While the U.S. has been confronting serious shortages of anti-ballistic missiles for its Patriot and THAAD systems, the emergence of hypersonic missile threats has introduced challenges that existing architecture was simply never designed to handle. American military installations in Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait are now operating with the full awareness that Iran possesses a weapon capable of striking them with high precision and a very low probability of being intercepted. That changes decision-making at every level. That changes force protection calculus. That changes what it means to project military power across the Middle East. There's one additional characteristic of the Fattah II worth understanding, one that rarely receives adequate attention. The Fattah II occupies a space between a ballistic missile and a cruise missile. As fast as the former, as maneuverable as the latter. That hybrid nature is precisely why hypersonic weapons have become the most closely watched military technology of the past decade. Existing air defense systems were architected to address one category or the other. High-speed missiles with predictable flight paths, or slower, maneuverable missiles that can be tracked over time. A weapon that combines extreme speed with continuous maneuverability defeats both defensive models simultaneously. And the world's air defense inventory is not yet equipped to handle that combination with any reliable degree of success. So where does all of this leave us? It leaves us at a genuinely historic inflection point, where a single strike from a single weapon has fundamentally reordered the conversation around air defense strategy, military doctrine, and the balance of power across the Middle East. 7 Israeli generals are dead. A fortified command center that was constructed to survive did not. 10 interceptors failed. And Israel's own defense industry has publicly stated that the era of conventional missile defense is over. That is the legacy of the Fattah II's combat debut. Right now, every military analyst, every defense ministry, and every weapons developer on the planet is working through what that means. The answers are not yet clear. The strategic response has not yet been defined. But the question has been posed loudly and unmistakably by a single hypersonic strike on a reinforced command center inside Israel. This story is still developing, and David Unfiltered will continue bringing you updates as new information surfaces. If this breakdown helped you understand what is really unfolding in this conflict, share it with someone who needs to see it, and drop a comment below. Do you believe Israel and the United States currently have a credible answer to the Fattah II? Let us know what you think, because this conversation is important and your perspective matters.